Yeah, and I think a reform to the way the parties are funded would also be a really important step forwards. I mean, it's uh, would you back like some sort of public funding for the parties on top of like the
No, not at all.
no, not nothing was so
Not
literally
at all. They don't deserve it.
no,
Why
but
should
I
why
and
should why should public money be used to prop up political parties? In some countries, it is right. So in some European countries, you get funding based on how many seats you get, which essentially just is a sort of way of perpetuating this oligarchy. I think you need a way of forcing the political parties to go among the people,
mm,
right, and to convince the people to support them economically. And the parties that have been most successful, I think, at doing that and attracting a large numbers of small donations. If you think about Bernie Sanders' campaign, for example, even Obama was better at doing that, right? They were kind of more responsive to what ordinary people wanted and less captured by big corporate interests.
mm,
So, and I mean, those are only very partial examples because, especially in the United States, um, you know, corporate power is enormous and corporate influence over the parties is vast. But I think they have to be forced. This is the thing. Like, if they didn't have to be forced, you wouldn't have to bring in all these things. But clearly, they have to be forced,
mm.
right? They're not going to do it of their own free will to become more responsive to ordinary people. They don't want to do it. The evidence of our eyes over the past 8 years is that you've got the Tory party going through convulsions at the moment, and what do they all agree on? We need to be more conservative. We need to be more, smaller government and free markets. That kind of policy package is supported by about 6% of the public.
Is that it?
Right. This is a party that is wildly out of whack with what the average person on the street thinks. They're wildly out of whack with the people that have voted for them in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember when Liz Truss became prime minister and she had this Thatcherite, big bang idea, they were polling people who voted Conservative in 2019, the people that elected Boris Johnson and this enormous Tory majority that had about 90 majority.
Mm-hmm.
People forget that it was a majority, very large majority government despite all the instability. What did they want? The vast majority of people wanted either higher taxes and spending or taxes and spending to remain the same. Only a very small minority, I think it was about 30% of Tory voters in 2019, wanted lower taxes. And when you package all these different things together, lower taxes, smaller states, less public spending, all the rest of it, you package those things together and say, is that what you want? The public don't want it. The public have had 40 years of Thatcherite policies, and when they look around, they see social decay, crime and disorder, dysfunctional public services, the plundering of the Commonwealth by large corporate interests, and they're sick of it. They want an alternative, and that's what the Brexit vote was about. It wasn't a vote for trade deregulation and free ports, right? That's the extent to which the right-wing Brexiteers had no idea what the people wanted. They weren't representing the people. They were dragged under Johnson into a more social democratic politics. If COVID hadn't happened, it's interesting to think the direction that Johnson was taking the Tories in was one that was much more about levelling up. It was much more about having an industrial policy. It was about trying to revitalise the economy. I'm doubtful it would have gone that far.
No.
But that's the direction he was taking them in, which was to be more responsive to where the actual voters are. Whereas the rest of the Tory party seem to be so up in the clouds that they think, Margaret Thatcher was so great, what we need is more Thatcherite policy. And that's just not what people want.
No.
And that's just the Tories. And obviously the Labour Party have got nothing particularly to offer, really,
No. Well, I mean,
either.
they've got. I think the real this awful problem is that the money that does get spent on public services is utterly wasted because we have this system where public services are provided by private corporations to a large extent. So we lose all of the money, and well, not all the money. We lose a large portion of the money and the accountability to no bid contracts and like faceless companies to whom things are outsourced. Like it might be like the NHS, but it's increasingly not the NHS. It's like whatever private corporation has won the contract, and then once you do that, the money like it zooms off and it goes through like several different like shell companies, and then the lawyers and the solicitors take their money. It maybe floats offshore for a bit, some more money gets taken out, dividends get paid to shareholders, and eventually the money that does get spent on the public service is far less than would be spent if you just had it nationalized. And you know, I'm not like some crazy like, yeah, let's nationalize everything, but you know, I'd like them to pick a lane. It's either, you know, let it be completely private and regulate it well, or, you know, nationalize it and let like a government run entity like actually run it, and not this like weird worst of both worlds hybrid that we've ended
No,
up in.
that it's absolutely right. We've got the worst of the state and the worst of the market in the UK. In every single field, there is kind of overweening, inefficient bureaucracy and just reams and reams of kind of pointless regulation, which often isn't effectively enforced, but is a barrier to development in a lot of areas. So, like the planning system, for example, is, I think, utterly dysfunctional. And yet, you also have the kind of worst of the market. So, the worst sort of predatory behaviours, the poor regulatory compliance, the parasitic nature of these companies, as you say, these contractors that just feed continuously off the state, don't innovate, don't invest. You know, rates of investment in the UK are incredibly low, near to the very bottom of the OECD. There is very little investment in new technology, in productivity. Companies are very happy to just extract rents, to employ lots of low-wage people in low value-added service work. So this country it combines the worst of a bureaucratic and wasteful and sclerotic bureaucracy with a sclerotic, non-innovating, lazy capitalist class. And that's why the economy is broadly stagnant. And until we can fix those things, it's very difficult to see how we can move forward. And you know, even in sectors like the NHS, where I think people think that somehow private companies have sort of taken over the NHS, and actually their share of NHS services is quite small. I think it's less than 10%. But in order to facilitate their participation, the NHS has been marketized. So there is an internal market within the NHS. So different bits of the NHS have to contract with each other and compete with each other. It's just incredibly wasteful and bureaucratic. So this is a good example of this combination of market, so the internal market inside the NHS, plus bureaucracy, because in order to facilitate a market inside a health service, you need enormous levels of bureaucracy to create this fake market. And that's happened across all the different sectors. You know, it happens in universities, for example. It's a total mess. So we need a new approach. Now, I can't tell you, here's my 5,000 point plan to rescue Britain. I don't think it can't be one person's job to come up with that. What we need is a revitalization of our democracy so that new parties, new forms of representation can be invented and allow new ideas to come forward. Because at the moment, they're just not. We're in a period of stagnation and even decline. And people, I think, are starting to lose hope. And when there is this void between people and their representatives, and when there is economic stagnation, and when people start to lose hope in the future, then they start to lose faith in democracy. And then we really are in a dangerous situation. So if we don't democratize the state, if we don't rebuild representative democracy, then we will just have endless populist eruptions, as we're seeing across all of the so-called advanced democracies, because they're all suffering from very similar structural problems.
Well, on that cheery note, I think that's a lovely place to end. Although it is nice to hear some other people diagnosing problems that I felt are, very, very much at the forefront of British politics. So I'll put the link for your book and stuff in the description below. Is there anything else you'd like to plug while we're still here?
For those people who remain on Twitter, they can follow me at Dr. Lee Jones.
Yeah, the
I'm
exodus
not
from
moving to Blue
the
Sky.
exodus from Twitter will not last. It will not last. I that is my prediction for 2025. They'll all be back because I've watched them leave.
I'm not so sure about that. I think they'll stay on Blue Sky and it'll just become this kind of liberal echo chamber where they're all super nice to each other. And Twitter will continue to become increasingly dysfunctional and useless as a place to sort of take the temperature and understand what a range of different people and people from different walks of life and different political perspectives think. That was its great utility. Like Twitter as the public square where you could hear what lots of different people were saying and thinking. That utility has been, greatly lost, but you don't get it back by retreating into a liberal echo chamber and sticking your fingers in your ears.
Well, anyway, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm unsure what will happen, but I think they'll be back because I've watched them leave numerous times. It's just my feeling. I mean, yeah, it's hard to tell what's actually going to happen with the space itself and the way its algorithm works, which I think it seemed like it might have been getting better, and then it seems to have got worse. And I can't tell.
I think it is broken. I think it just doesn't. It doesn't do what it used to do in the past by showing you stuff that you're interested in. Engagement with posts is extremely low. It is just broken. And you would think that they would be able to see that from their own dashboards and usage data, right? That people are not spending as much time on it as before. Kind of engagement rates are very low, etc. But they don't seem to be doing anything about it. They seem to be focused on trying to monetize the platform in various ways, which I don't think is very successful. No. So it's a real shame of, what happens when somebody takes over a platform and runs it very badly, runs it into the ground, Sympathetic as I was to Musk's points about freedom of speech, as somebody that was absolutely shadow banned for a number of years, I get it, and I think there shouldn't be online censorship, but he's gone so far that he's broken it, right? And now he's going to have the chance to do that with the American state.
Do you run a business of any kind? Do you want 25% off up to 20 taxi rides? Well, if you sign up to Bolt Business with my promo code, that's exactly what you'll get. You don't have to use all 20 rides, and you can use it for your own business rides or for your employees. It couldn't be simpler. Follow the link in the description and use the code BB25OFF20 to get 25% off 20 taxi rides today. That's BB25OFF20. Hey everyone, thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.